What kind of man throws his wife onto the street with nothing but a suitcase and a shattered heart? The question burned in my mind as I stood on the cracked sidewalk outside our Brooklyn brownstone, the door slamming shut behind me. Ethan's voice still echoed, cold and final. "You're a burden now, Lila. I can't carry us both." The words stung worse than the autumn chill biting through my thin jacket. My hands trembled around the handle of my suitcase, packed in a frenzy while he loomed over me, his eyes devoid of the warmth I once knew. 10 years of marriage, countless sacrifices, and now this. Evicted from my own life because I'd lost my job at the publishing house. The world spun, but beneath the pain, a secret simmered, one Ethan could never imagine. I wasn't as broken as he thought. Tucked away in a forgotten account, hidden even from myself until recently, was a fortune that could change everything. The street was quiet, save for the distant hum of traffic and the rustle of leaves skittering across the pavement. Mrs. Carter, our nosy neighbor, peered from her stoop, her lips pursed in judgment. I wanted to scream, to tell her this wasn't my fault, but pride glued my mouth shut. I'd been the perfect wife, supporting Ethan through his failed startup, cooking dinners when he worked late, even giving up my dreams of writing to pay our bills. And now, with one pink slip, I was disposable. I dragged my suitcase down the steps, each thud a reminder of my new reality. Homeless, jobless, but not hopeless. That secret account, a relic from my grandmother's estate, held millions, money I'd stumbled upon only weeks ago while sorting through old papers. I hadn't told Ethan, not out of deceit, but because I wanted to surprise him, to rebuild our crumbling life together. How naive I'd been. I walked, suitcase wheels grinding against the pavement, toward the only place I could think to go, the tiny diner on Flatbush Avenue where I used to meet my best friend, Mara. The neon sign flickered as I pushed through the door, the smell of coffee and grease wrapping around me like a hug. Mara was already there, her wild curls spilling over a booth, her eyes narrowing as she saw my face. "Lila, what the hell happened?" she demanded, shoving a mug of coffee toward me. I collapsed into the seat, the story spilling out. Ethan's cruelty, the eviction, the way he'd looked at me like I was nothing. Mara's jaw tightened, but she listened, her hand squeezing mine. "He doesn't know about the money, does he?" she asked, her voice low. I shook my head, the weight of my secret settling heavier. "Good," she said, a glint in her eye. "Let him think he's won. You're gonna rise, Lila, and he's gonna choke on it." The diner's warmth couldn't erase the cold knot in my chest, but Mara's words sparked something. I wasn't just a victim. I had power Ethan couldn't touch. That night, I checked into a cheap motel, the kind with buzzing lights and questionable stains. Lying on the lumpy bed, I pulled out my phone and logged into the account. The numbers glowed, $3.2 million. My grandmother, a recluse who'd never trusted banks, had left it in a trust I'd forgotten about, buried under years of grief and distraction. I could buy a new life, a new home, anything, but first, I needed a plan. Ethan thought he'd broken me, but he'd only lit a fuse. Morning came, gray and heavy with clouds. I met Mara at a coffee shop, where she'd already mapped out steps. A lawyer, a new apartment, a way to rebuild without Ethan knowing. "You don't owe him a dime," she said, scribbling notes on a napkin. "But you need to be smart. He's not done with you yet." Her warning hung in the air as my phone buzzed, Ethan's name on the screen. My heart lurched. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Lila, I didn't mean for it to go this far," he said, his voice softer, almost pleading. "Come home. We can work it out." I wanted to believe him, to cling to the man I'd loved, but the image of him shoving my suitcase at me flashed in my mind. "You made your choice," I said, hanging up. Mara grinned. "That's my girl." But doubt crept in. Was I wrong to hide the money? Could we have fixed things if I told him? I pushed the thoughts away, focusing on the next step, meeting the lawyer Mara recommended. His office was a stark contrast to the motel, a sleek Manhattan high-rise with views of the city I no longer felt part of. Mr. Kaplan, a wiry man with sharp eyes, listened as I explained everything, including the fortune. "You're in a strong position," he said, tapping his pen. "But Ethan might come after you if he finds out. We need to protect your assets now." His words were a lifeline, but they also confirmed Mara's warning. Ethan wasn't done. As I left Kaplan's office, the city pulsed around me, alive with possibility and danger. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for the life I deserved. Ethan had underestimated me, but that was his mistake. The fortune wasn't just money. It was my chance to rewrite my story. And I'd make sure he'd regret ever thinking he could cast me aside. The days blurred into a strange rhythm of survival and strategy. I moved from the motel to a small studio apartment in Queens, rented under Mara's name to keep Ethan off my trail. The place was cramped, with peeling wallpaper and a sink that dripped, but it was mine, a sanctuary where I could plan my next move. Every morning, I checked the account, the $3.2 million staring back like a silent promise. Kaplan had set up a trust to shield it, but the secrecy gnawed at me. Hiding felt like cowardice, yet revealing it too soon could unravel everything. Ethan's call lingered in my mind, his voice softer than I'd expected. Was he regretting his choice, or was it a trap? I couldn't trust him, not after he'd turned our home into a battlefield. Mara became my anchor, meeting me daily to plot and vent. Over coffee, she pushed me to think bigger. "You're not just surviving, Lila," she said, her eyes fierce. "You're building an empire. Use that money to show him what you're made of." Her words ignited a spark, but fear held me back. What if Ethan found out? What if he came for me, claiming I'd deceived him? The questions swirled as I walked the city, my old life fading with every step. Brooklyn's brownstones, once my haven, now felt like a stranger's territory. I avoided our old haunts, but memories ambushed me. Ethan laughing over pizza, his arm around me. Had it all been a lie? Then came the twist that shook me. While sorting through my suitcase, I found a letter tucked inside an old journal, written in my grandmother's shaky handwriting. It wasn't just about the money. It revealed she'd owned a small publishing house decades ago, one she'd left to me in her will. I'd assumed it was defunct, but the letter hinted it still existed, dormant, waiting for someone to claim it. My heart raced. This wasn't just a fortune, it was a legacy. I could revive it, become the writer and publisher I'd always dreamed of. But the timing felt cruel. Ethan had crushed my confidence, and now I had to decide whether to step into this new role or stay hidden. I called Kaplan, who confirmed the publishing house was real, though barely operational, its assets tied to the trust. "It's yours, Lila," he said, "but it's a risk. Starting a business now, with Ethan circling, could expose you." I hung up, torn between fear and ambition. Mara, of course, was all in. "This is your shot," she said, slamming her fist on the table. "Ethan kicked you out because he thought you were nothing. Show him you're everything." Her passion was infectious, but doubt lingered. I wasn't ready to face Ethan, not yet. That evening, I walked to the pier near my apartment, the Hudson River glinting under the setting sun. The city's hum felt like a heartbeat, urging me forward. I imagined the publishing house reborn, a place for stories like mine, for voices silenced by betrayal. But Ethan's shadow loomed. His calls had stopped, replaced by texts. "I'm sorry, Lila. Let's talk." Each one felt like a hook, pulling me back to a life I no longer wanted. I deleted them, but the ache remained. Was I running from him or from myself? The next day, I took a step toward reclaiming my life. I met with a business consultant Kaplan recommended, a woman named Claire who specialized in reviving small companies. Her office was a cozy loft filled with books, a stark contrast to Kaplan's sterile high-rise. "You've got something special here," Claire said, reviewing the publishing house's records. "But it'll take work, branding, hiring, marketing. Are you ready to be seen?" Her question hit hard. Being seen meant risking Ethan's wrath, but it also meant stepping into my power. I nodded, my throat tight. "I'm ready." As I left Claire's office, my phone buzzed again. Ethan. This time, I didn't answer. Instead, I texted Mara, "I'm doing it. I'm bringing the publishing house back." Her reply was instant. "Hell yes. Let's burn his world down." I smiled, feeling the first flicker of control. Ethan thought he'd broken me, but he'd only pushed me towards something greater. The fortune was my shield, the publishing house my sword. I wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. I was fighting to win. The publishing house, called Willow Press, was a ghost of its former self, tucked in a dusty corner of Soho. Its office was a single room above a bakery, smelling of stale paper and fresh bread. I stood in the doorway, clutching the keys Claire had handed me, my heart pounding with equal parts dread and excitement. This was mine, my grandmother's dream, now my chance to rebuild. The walls were lined with empty shelves, the desk buried under yellowed manuscripts. I could almost hear her voice, urging me to breathe life into this place. But Ethan's shadow clung to me. What if he found out? What if he tried to claim a piece of this, too? Claire and I spent days drafting a plan. We'd start small, releasing a few titles, building a brand around authentic, underrepresented voices. My own manuscript, a novel I'd shelved years ago to support Ethan, would be the flagship. It's raw, Lila, Claire said, reading the pages I'd hesitantly shared. It's you. People will feel that. Her confidence bolstered mine, but the work was daunting. I hired a small team, a designer, an editor, and a marketing intern, all funded by the trust. Each step felt like a defiance of Ethan's dismissal, a brick in the wall I was building between my past and my future. But Ethan wasn't silent for long. A week after I signed the lease for Willow Press, he showed up at the coffee shop where Mara and I met. I froze as he walked in, his familiar broad shoulders filling the doorway. "Lila," he said, his voice low, almost gentle. "I've been looking for you." Mara's eyes flashed, but I waved her off. I needed to face him. "What do you want, Ethan?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. He sat across from me, his hands clasped like a man confessing. "I messed up," he said. "I was stressed, angry. I didn't mean to push you out." His eyes searched mine, and for a moment, I saw the man I'd married. But then I remembered the suitcase, the slammed door, the word burden. "You don't get to undo that," I said, standing. He grabbed my wrist, not hard, but enough to make Mara lunge forward. "Let her go," she snapped. He did, but his eyes lingered, calculating. "This isn't over," he said, leaving as quickly as he'd come. Mara was livid. "He's sniffing around for something," she said, pacing. "You need to be careful." I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere. Ethan's sudden remorse felt staged, like he knew more than he let on. Had he heard about Willow Press? The trust? I doubled down on secrecy, telling Claire and the team to keep my involvement quiet. But the city was small, and whispers traveled fast. The twist deepened when I found an old photo in the Willow Press files. A picture of my grandmother with a man who looked eerily like Ethan's father. The resemblance was uncanny, and a note on the back read, "With James, 1985. Partner in dreams." My stomach churned. Could Ethan's family be tied to Willow Press? I dug deeper, finding records of a failed partnership between my grandmother and a man named James Carter, Ethan's father. They'd clashed over the company's direction, and she'd bought him out. If Ethan knew, he might think he had a claim. The thought made my blood run cold. I confronted Kaplan, who confirmed the connection. "It's possible Ethan knows," he said. "But legally, he has no standing. The trust is ironclad." Still, the revelation shook me. Ethan wasn't just my ex. He might be an enemy with a vendetta. I threw myself into Willow Press, working late nights to distract from the fear. The team was coming together. The first book, my book, nearing completion. But Ethan's presence lingered, a storm cloud on my horizon. One night, alone in the office, I heard a knock. My heart stopped, expecting Ethan, but it was Mara, her face pale. "He's asking around about you," she said. "Bartenders, neighbors, he's digging." I gripped the desk, my resolve hardening. Ethan thought he could intimidate me, but he didn't know the fire he'd ignited. Willow Press wasn't just a business, it was my rebellion, and I'd fight for it, no matter what he threw at me. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. It was a rainy evening, the kind that turned New York into a maze of reflections and shadows. I was locking up Willow Press when Ethan stepped out from an alley, his coat slick with rain, his eyes burning with something I couldn't read, anger, desperation, or both. "Lila," he said, his voice cutting through the downpour. "We need to talk." My pulse raced, but I stood my ground, the keys biting into my palm. "There's nothing to say," I replied, turning to walk away. He grabbed my arm, firmer this time, and I yanked free, my heart pounding. "Don't touch me," I snapped, my voice echoing off the wet bricks. He stepped closer, his face inches from mine. "I know about the money," he said, the words landing like a punch. My breath caught, but I kept my face neutral. What money? I asked, playing dumb. He laughed, a bitter sound. Don't lie to me. I found the trust documents in our old files. Your grandmother's fortune, millions, Lila. You hid it from me. His accusation stung, but it also clarified everything. He wasn't here to apologize. He wanted a piece of what he thought he deserved. You threw me out, I said, my voice low but steady. You don't get to claim anything now. His eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I thought he might lunge. Instead, he stepped back, rain dripping from his hair. This isn't over, he said, disappearing into the night. I stumbled back to my apartment, soaked and shaken. Mara was waiting, her face grim as I recounted the encounter. He's not just after the money, she said, pouring me a glass of wine. He's after control. You need to hit back, Lila, hard. She was right, but how? Ethan's knowledge of the trust changed everything. If he went public, he could drag me into a legal mess, even if he had no claim. Kaplan had warned me about perception. Ethan could paint me as the deceitful wife, hiding millions while he struggled. The thought made me sick, but it also fueled me. He wanted a fight? I'd give him one. The next day, I threw myself into Willow Press with a ferocity I didn't know I had. We finalized the cover for my novel, a story of betrayal and redemption that now felt painfully personal. The team was buzzing, unaware of the storm brewing outside. Claire noticed my tension but didn't pry, instead pushing me to focus on the launch. This is your moment, she said, adjusting a mock-up of the book. Don't let him steal it. Her words were a lifeline, pulling me back to my purpose. But Ethan's threat loomed, and I knew he'd strike again. Then came the twist that nearly broke me. A letter arrived at the office, addressed to me in Ethan's handwriting. Inside was a photocopy of an old contract between my grandmother and his father, claiming James Carter had been cheated out of Willow Press. A note was scrawled at the bottom. I'll take what's mine, Lila. You can't hide forever. My hands shook as I read it. This wasn't just about the money anymore. It was personal, a vendetta rooted in decades-old grudges. I called Kaplan, who was unfazed. It's a bluff, he said. The contract's void. Your grandmother bought him out fair and square. But Ethan's desperate. He'll try to scare you into settling. I didn't sleep that night, my mind racing with worst-case scenarios. What if Ethan went to the press? What if he ruined Willow Press before it could even begin? But as dawn broke, something shifted. I wasn't the scared woman he'd thrown out. I had a team, a purpose, a legacy. I met Mara at the pier. The river calmed despite my churning thoughts. He's trying to break you, she said, her voice fierce. But you're stronger than he knows. I nodded, a plan forming. I'd launch Willow Press, make it a success, and show Ethan he couldn't touch me. The confrontation had lit a fire, and I was ready to burn brighter than ever. The launch of Willow Press was set for a crisp November evening. The Soho office transformed into a warm, inviting space. String lights draped the shelves, now filled with books, and my novel sat proudly at the center of a display. The team had worked miracles, and the buzz was palpable. Local authors, bloggers, and even a few critics mingled, sipping wine and flipping through pages. I wore a simple black dress, my nerves masked by a smile, but inside, I was a storm. Ethan's threat hung over me. His letter burned into my memory. I scanned the crowd, half expecting him to crash the event, but he didn't show. Not yet. Mara stood by my side, her presence a shield. You did this, Lila, she whispered, squeezing my arm. This is yours. I nodded, but my eyes kept darting to the door. The evening unfolded smoothly. Readings, laughter, applause, but the tension never left me. Then, halfway through, Claire pulled me aside, her face pale. There's a reporter here, she said, nodding toward a man in a corner, scribbling notes. He's asking about you, your grandmother, and some old partnership dispute. My stomach dropped. Ethan. He'd gone to the press, just as I'd feared. I approached the reporter, a wiry man named Greg, and kept my voice calm. I hear you're curious about Willow Press's history, I said, offering a smile. He raised an eyebrow, clearly expecting resistance. I got a tip about a dispute with a former partner, he said, fishing. Something about a fortune and a cheated heir. I laughed, light and easy, though my heart pounded. Old family drama, I said. My grandmother settled all disputes legally. Willow Press is about new stories, not old grudges. He scribbled, unconvinced, but I'd planted a seed. I couldn't let Ethan's lies derail me now. The night ended with a standing ovation for my reading, my voice steady as I shared a passage from my novel, a scene of a woman rising from betrayal. The crowd's warmth wrapped around me, but the reporter's presence lingered like a bruise. Back at my apartment, I collapsed, the weight of Ethan's vendetta crushing me. Mara stayed over, refusing to leave me alone. He's losing, she said, pouring tea. This is him flailing. But I wasn't so sure. The next morning, a blog post surfaced, hinting at secrets behind Willow Press's funding. It didn't name Ethan, but his fingerprints were all over it. I called Kaplan, who was already on it. We can sue for defamation if he pushes further, he said. But the best defense is success. Make Willow Press undeniable. His words echoed Mara's, and I clung to them. I poured everything into the company, late nights editing, meetings with distributors, interviews to counter the rumors. My novel was gaining traction, reviews praising its raw honesty. But Ethan wasn't done. A week later, he showed up at the office, unannounced, his face a mask of false calm. Lila, let's settle this, he said, leaning against the doorframe. Give me what's fair, and I'll back off. I stood, my hands steady despite the rage boiling inside. Fair, I said, stepping closer. You threw me out, Ethan. You don't get to demand anything. His mask slipped, anger flashing in his eyes. You'll regret this, he said, turning to leave. The door slammed, and I sank into a chair, trembling. Mara was right. He was desperate, but that made him dangerous. I doubled security at the office, but the fear lingered. Willow Press was my dream, but Ethan was turning it into a battlefield. I had to end this, not just for me, but for the legacy I was building. The storm was coming, and I needed to be ready. Ethan's campaign escalated, a slow poison seeping into my life. Anonymous posts online questioned Willow Press's legitimacy, calling it a rich girl's vanity project. Whispers reached my team, sowing doubt. The intern quit, spooked by the rumors. I felt the ground slipping, my dream teetering on the edge. But surrender wasn't an option. I called a team meeting, laying everything bare, my grandmother's legacy, the trust, my fight to rebuild. This is our company, I said, meeting each pair of eyes. We're telling stories that matter. Don't let lies stop us. Their nods, tentative at first, grew firm. Claire squeezed my shoulder. We're with you, Lila. But Ethan's next move was bolder. A lawsuit landed on Kaplan's desk, claiming I'd concealed assets during our marriage and that Ethan was entitled to half the trust. It was a desperate grab, legally weak, but designed to humiliate. Kaplan was furious. He's got nothing, he said, tossing the papers. But this will drag on, cost you time and peace. I nodded, my jaw tight. Ethan wanted to wear me down, to make me crack. Instead, I leaned harder into Willow Press. We signed 2 new authors, their stories raw and powerful, and the buzz grew. My novel hit a local bestseller list, a small victory that felt like a roar. Then came the night that broke everything open. I was working late, the office quiet except for the hum of my laptop, when the door burst open. Ethan stood there, eyes wild, a folder in his hand. You think you can bury me? He shouted, slamming the folder on the desk. It was filled with old photos, contracts, and letters, his father's supposed proof of being cheated by my grandmother. This is my family's legacy, too, he said, his voice shaking. I stood, my heart racing but my voice calm. Your father was paid off, Ethan. This is over. He laughed, a jagged sound. I'll ruin you, Lila. The press, the courts, I'll take everything. Something snapped. Years of his control, his dismissal, his betrayal boiled over. You already tried, I said, stepping closer. You threw me out, called me a burden. But I'm still here, building something you can't touch. His face twisted, and for a moment, I thought he'd hit me. Instead, he grabbed the folder and left, the door slamming in his wake. I sank to the floor, tears burning my eyes. Not from fear, but from the weight of what I'd survived. The next day, I went public. In an interview with a local paper, I told my story, not the trust, but the truth of my marriage, my eviction, my fight to rebuild. I spoke of Willow Press, its mission, my grandmother's dream. The response was overwhelming. Support flooded in, from readers, authors, even strangers. The rumors faded, replaced by stories of my resilience. Ethan's lawsuit crumbled. Kaplan shredded it in court, proving his claims baseless. The online attack slowed, then stopped. Ethan's power was slipping, and he knew it. But the final blow came quietly. A package arrived at the office, unmarked, containing a single letter from Ethan. "I'm done," it read. "You win. No apology, no remorse, just surrender." I burned it in the office sink, the flames curling around his words. Mara cheered when I told her, but I felt no joy, only relief. Ethan's collapse wasn't my victory, Willow Press was. The company was thriving, my novel climbing charts, new voices finding a home. I'd turned his betrayal into my strength, and he'd never see a dime of my fortune. A year later, Willow Press was no longer a ghost. The Soho office buzzed with energy, new hires, new books, new dreams. My novel had sparked a movement, inspiring readers to share their own stories of betrayal and rebirth. I walked the office each morning, coffee in hand, marveling at what I'd built. The trust, once a secret, was now a tool, funding scholarships for young writers, amplifying voices that had been silenced. Ethan was a memory, his name rarely mentioned, his threats dissolved into the city's hum. I'd heard he'd moved away, chasing some new venture that predictably failed. I didn't care. My life was here, in these shelves, these stories, this legacy. Mara remained my rock, though she teased me about becoming a mogul. "You're too soft for that," she'd say, grinning. But I wasn't soft. I was steel, forged in the fire of Ethan's betrayal. I'd learned to trust myself, to fight for what mattered. Claire and the team became family, their belief in me a mirror reflecting my own strength. We hosted events, packed with people hungry for truth, for stories that cut deep. Willow Press wasn't just a business. It was a beacon, proof that you could rise from ashes and shine. One evening, I stood on the pier, the Hudson River reflecting the city's lights. I thought of my grandmother, her letter, her dream. I'd honored it, not just for her, but for me. The fortune had been a gift, but my courage was my own. I'd faced Ethan, the press, my own fears, and come out stronger. The wind carried the city's pulse, and I felt it in my bones, a rhythm of survival, of hope, of victory. I wrote a new novel that year, not about betrayal, but about triumph. It was dedicated to every woman who'd been told she was nothing, who'd been cast aside but refused to break. Readers called it inspiring, but to me, it was simply true. I'd lived it. And as I signed copies at a packed bookstore, a young woman approached, her eyes bright with tears. "Your story saved me," she said. "I thought I was done, but you showed me I could start again." I hugged her, my own eyes stinging. This was why I fought, not just for me, but for her, for all of us. The city stretched before me, endless and alive. I wasn't the woman Ethan had thrown out, nor the girl who'd hidden her dreams to please him. I was Lila, whole and unyielding, my fortune not just in money but in purpose. Willow Press would grow, and so would I, carrying my grandmother's legacy into a future I'd built with my own hands. The world had tried to break me, but I'd turned its blows into wings. And I'd soar, not because of what I had, but because of who I'd become.